1 minute. I'd like to call our City Council to order this evening, and we're going to begin with the flag ceremony in recognition of this being September 11th and the events that took place 17 years ago today. We've invited the 1st to 11th Attack Recon Battalion from the Utah National Guard to do our flag presentation, so we'll turn the time to them. Following their presentation, we've got firefighter Brandon Van Monstrand will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Following the flag ceremony.
Will the audience please arise for the presentation of colors? Will the audience please repeat the Pledge of Allegiance with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The audience may be seated. Thank you.
Again, I'd like to thank the 1st to 11th Attack Recon Battalion from the Utah National Guard for their service to our country as well as their service tonight. We will begin with communications, our city manager and staff reports.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. It is with a heavy heart that I acknowledge that this will be the last meeting we have with Mr. Linares. His presence, his professionalism, and his help has been extremely appreciated. The folks of Moab are getting a one of a kind. They're damn lucky. With that said, I'll indicate there are at least 2 members of the department heads that'd like to speak. I'm aware of Dave Naylor and Brian Clegg. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to give a quick report on the Demolition Derby we had this past weekend. It was a huge success, and we had a sold-out crowd at that event. And Stern Dirt gave the spectators every penny's worth. It was a great show. And so just want to thank all the staff that was involved in putting this event on, and then also Mayor and Council for your continued support into these events. And then also a quick reminder that there is Get Into the River event this Saturday from 9 to 11. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a reminder, we are having the official ribbon cutting for the new Public Works building will be held on September 19th at 11 a.m. That's for city council and staff. There will be hot dogs and hamburgers and drinks served. So if you can, we'd love to have you. Thanks.
So we'll go to council members. We'll start with Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to reiterate with Parks, I had fun attending the demolition derby. My son loved the Minion car, it was nice to see it sold out, and nice to see that we had a TV program that was there. Just really well done. So I just appreciate the efforts there and appreciate the response of staff with the street issue that I'm working on. So just appreciate the quickness that the staff is responding to customer needs. That's really, or resident needs. I think that's very beneficial. So that's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Jacob.
Nothing tonight, thanks.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Thank you. I want to echo Councilman Anderson's thanks for the derby. That was very interesting. That was my first opportunity or time I've gone to one, and that was very interesting. Because I'm frugal, had a little bit of an issue with people just wrecking cars. And halfway through, my daughter-in-law said, "Oh, you should have brought some earplugs." I said, "Well, that would have been nice to have told me, before we left." So we have the greatest committee. It's called Healthy West Jordan, and those folks are wonderful. And we are going to have 4 classes coming up. On September 20th, it will be a suicide prevention class, a QPR, which question, persuade, and refer. And I think that's a timely thing. All of these, I know it's on the Facebook page that you can find the link to sign up. Then on September 27th will be a CPR and first aid class. And the October 4th will be an addiction awareness. It will talk about opioids, and there is a dinner, and that's free, so you may as well sign up. And October 11th will be Holidays of Good Cheer, and that will just be basic good health reminders, maybe nothing new, but reminders of how we can stay healthy. Thank you.
Councilmember Lamb.
I just want to apologize for being a little bit late. I had to go pick up my daughter from her soccer practice, but I got here, and I'm happy to be here tonight, so thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank the National Guard for the color guard that they did this evening. I've had the privilege of being in the World Trade Center towers prior to the 9/11 incident, and I've had the privilege of being in that location since that incident. And I appreciate our firefighters, some of those who are here, and other first responders, and those that sacrifice great deals to help other people at the drop of a hat. So thank you for those who serve in those areas.
Thank you. We'll now move to citizen comments and remind those that come to the lectern that they have 3 minutes in which to deliver their message. And we'll start with those that have signed up, and I have first Corey Thompson.
Good afternoon. I'm here just to ask the council if they can help me with a property line adjustment. I've purchased a parcel of land. When I purchased my home, that my backyard was already moved onto, which there's a trailer park behind my house. All their fence lines are already on my property, so I'm just trying to split it up, sell it to them how it is, and make the neighborhood better to solve the problem. I'm not sure if there's anything you guys can help me with, but I would appreciate anything that you guys can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Someone will, from staff, will get in touch with you.
Mayor, Council, I can tell you that we've met with Mr. Thompson. We have some ideas. Scott Langford and I met with him briefly. We are going to put him in touch with Larry Gardner and have a memo probably to share with you at some point. I'll just indicate that in his subdivision, as the lots were sold it looks to be approximately 9 different properties just kept getting added on to his property. As they started to close the property, the county didn't want to leave that that property unclaimed. As a result, he has a parcel that actually looks kind of like a shape of an L with a trigger on it. It's odd shape, so we're gonna try to clean it up. We'll bring that to your attention if we have to. We'll try to work within the department, with the staff to get that fixed.
Thank you. Vic Groves.
I actually came to talk about 2 or 3 different things, but in some of my conversations before this meeting, I narrowed it down to one. And that one thing is I just want to express appreciation. I know that you get paid somewhat for what you do, but I also know that that is money well spent, and I appreciate your service to us as citizens. I've lived in 2 days from today, I will have lived in West Jordan for 29 years. And I've been friends with many of the city councilmen off and on, and the mayors off and on during that time. But I can just tell you that as a citizen of West Jordan, I appreciate what you do. Thank you. Thanks for reaching out to the citizens, for listening to us, and for doing those things that keeps our city going and that keeps our city, I think, one of the best cities in the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address? Please come to the lectern and
my name is Brigham Latimer, and I'm just here to express a concern with Judge Coons. I have emailed every one of you on the panel, including the city attorney and city manager, in regards to the case that was just dismissed willy-nilly and just without talking to the defendant. And it was in regards to domestic abuse and child abuse. And the offender pled to the court to try and get his record expunged. The city attorney's office called the defendant, and they had to be present, and the judge never even gave her a chance to plead her case and say, no, his record should not be expunged. Now his record's clean, and he's still harassing her. And I'm very passionate about this, as you can tell. And I took the steps to contact every one of you. Councilman Whitelock was the only one that responded. And this has to be changed. I really want to file a complaint against the judge and have this thing reheard. This is a serious matter. This lady is in fear of her life. And there's record after record on the police department's records of coming to her house and protecting her and getting this guy off, her ex-husband, off her property. And the judge doesn't even listen to any of it. Anyway, something has to be done, and I'm here, and I'm just going to say this. I've helped governors get elected, city council members, and mayors get elected. I've even run for office myself. I'm not afraid to run myself and make a change here if it need be. This is a serious issue, and it needs to be addressed. That's all I have.
thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the council tonight? Seeing none, I will close the citizen comments and move to the consent calendar. I have not been asked to pull anything, so I will entertain a motion at this point. Councilmember Burton.
Move to approve the items on the consent calendar.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Burton, a second from Councilmember Jacob. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, let's vote.
Councilmember Burton,
Yes.
Mayor Riding,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb,
Yes.
and Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
We'll now move to the public hearing portion of our agenda. Receive public input and consider for approval ordinance 18-30 regarding the preliminary development plan for Sunset Villas located at approximately 7292 South Redwood Road. Preliminary development plan, Cannon and Company / Gary Cannon applicant. Scott Langford.
Thanks, Mayor, Council. For the summary of the request, we have Lisa Elchin here from our planning staff. The applicant is also here, at least I thought I saw him, but Lisa will be able to give you a synopsis of the request.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. This item is a development plan for the proposed Sunset Villas senior housing development located at 7292 South Redwood Road. If you'll remember, sometime back, the council approved a rezone for this property in anticipation of this project coming forward to the R38 zone district with a senior housing overlay, which allows up to 8 dwelling units per acre. The applicant is requesting a subdivision on the 2.7 acre parcel for 17 lots and a detention basin that results in 6.1 dwelling units per acre. Staff feels like the applicant has been very flexible and helpful in meeting all the code requirements for the plan, with just a few outstanding items that are listed as conditions of approval on page 2 of your packet. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have, and Mr. Cannon has not arrived yet, and I'll try to answer any questions for him also.
Councilmember Whitelock has a question.
And I'm not sure if it will be you or maybe someone over here that will need to answer this, but not too long ago we talked about Redwood Road, and while this sits back, some of the egress does not. And so my question is it set back far enough, or in the future, when that plan comes to fruition, are we going to have to be saying, you got to move those pillars, they're really nice, but now they've got to be moved back?
Yes, let's see. The subdivision, I guess, doesn't give us the details. Are you referencing, Councilmember Whitelock, the entry feature to that? Lisa, do you have the setback off?
He does not have that listed on the site plan, an exact place where it'll be located, so it can be set back easily enough
With the
to
approval,
meet the new.
yeah, with the
setbacks.
approval of this development plan, that would be a great additional comment prior to final approval, which is at staff level. We'll make sure that any physical improvements on that property, on that leg that you can see closest to Redwood, would have the proper setbacks. That will not be an issue. Parcel A that you can see that I've got the arrow pointing to is a detention pond area. And so there's a lot of flexibility on pushing any entry features back.
Right, they just had some really nice pillars at the entrance, and I just would hate to have those placed in that area that we spoke about.
Absolutely. We'll make sure that final approval will push that back to what that future right-of-way may need to be.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. Mine is very similar to Councilman Whitelock's. But I would also think about parcel A, which is a retention pond. So are they going to lose that retention pond if and when that comes? Do we want to have them expand that into, reduce lot 1 and move it all the way into there? Because we won't have a retention pond anymore, and that would be problematic, would it not?
The existing right-of-way on Redwood Road is already, basically, it would accommodate the Redwood Road master plan that the council's reviewed and approved. With the exception, I think it may have an additional 5 to 10 feet to, I really don't see that the detention basin being completely gone. If indeed we do encroach onto that, we can make it a little bit deeper and accommodate the extra volume that's needed. So that's a fair question, but I think the current configuration could handle that.
Okay. And the other thought I had is, if this is a senior housing thing, you're talking about putting a couple of park benches there, and those poor seniors aren't gonna be able to hear anything anyway, with the noise on Redwood Road. It just seems like a strange location for a park right next to Redwood Road for seniors to hang out. But if they put it anyplace else, we'd have to remove a lot somewhere else and put a park in there. So as a senior housing, the only thing I can see the senior housing on this is because they're putting the age limit on there. I don't see any features to accommodate seniors other than it's a senior housing and it's all one level with basements. And are the basements finished? I didn't see any evidence of that.
That has not been designated whether they be finished or not.
I didn't see
I assume
evidence.
the property owner would.
Thank you.
There is an additional gathering space along here. All of this is a very large green space area, which will also have park benches and amenities for them to meet and gather.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you remind me that sliver of land that's just like this big? It's on this, but on the previous one. Do they have any plans for that, or are they just gonna leave it like it is?
The applicant has been in talks with the property owners for a while. If you'll refer to your packet, condition of approval number 5 said that the legal descriptions are negotiated and agreed upon by the property owner and the adjoining neighbors prior to the approval of the final subdivision plat.
Okay, that's all I want. I just want to remember what they were gonna do with it and how that was going, because obviously it's not big enough even to put a sidewalk on, it looks like.
Yes,
But
the applicant does want to get rid of that.
okay, thank you.
Seeing no more questions, we will open this up for public hearing. Anybody that wishes to speak to this item may come to the lectern. Seeing none, we'll close public hearing and turn it back to council for discussion and/or motion. Councilmember Burton.
If I might follow up with my earlier comments, I'm still concerned about that. Sure, we got that little sliver of green space over parcel B. You know, if they have grandkids over or something, they're playing ball. Parcel A is not very feasible because you got Redwood Road right there. Parcel B is not feasible because it's long and skinny. I would like to see a real park in there someplace. And I realize that would lose a lot somewhere, but take a lot out of an inter area and then make a green space in one of those spots.
Councilmember Whitelock.
I don't see a lot of kids getting out to play these days, so I guess I'm not as concerned about that. As long as they have good Wi-Fi, I think the grandparents will be fine. So I would like to make a motion that we approve ordinance 1830 regarding the preliminary development plan for Sunset Villas.
Councilmember Lamb.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Whitelock, a second from Councilmember Lamb. Discussion to the motion. Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to express my support for the motion and for this development plan. Keeping in mind this is in an R3 zone, they could have packed a lot more in here if they'd wanted to. For the seniors who want a park, I'm sure there's another senior housing development that has a park in it. So I think we're good. I like this a lot. Thanks.
Councilmember Lamb.
I too, like Councilmember Jacob, I'm going to be voting for this. I do have concern, I guess this is more in a general plan, as we see more and more housing developments going on Redwood Road, it just puts more and more traffic on an already busy street. There's also some worries about, future-wise, everyone talks about widening streets as well. So this looks like they've left that parcel, I can't read, is it parcel A? So it looks like it does leave room for future growth with a road there. So I'm happy about that, but I will be voting for this as well. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more discussion, let's vote.
Councilmember Anderson,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Mayor Riding,
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb,
Yes.
Councilmember Burton,
Aye.
and Councilmember Whitelock.
Yes.
Vote passes 6-0 in favor.
So we'll now move to the business items on our agenda. 8A, discussion and possible action regarding ordinance 18-31, amending the 2009 West Jordan Municipal Code, repealing Title I, Chapter 4, Article C, and adopting Title 16, Administrative Code Enforcement Hearing Program. Brock Hudson.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. If you remember, August 22nd, I brought to you a presentation regarding this amended code. So there is no presentation this evening. If you have any questions, I am available to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, Councilmember Whitelock, first question.
Asking for patience here, gentlemen, because I have a lot. The first one is, it says issued violator versus property owner. So how do we do that? Because when I read that, I thought, of course, of rental units, because I have a lot of homes in my neighborhood that are being rented out and not necessarily cared for to the neighborhood standard. So we refer to them kindly as the slumlords, because they don't take care of it, and neither do their renters. So how does that work? Is the landlord, the homeowner, going to get the citation? Is the person living there going to get the citation?
We run and we send the notices to the responsible party listed on the county assessor's website as the last known address of the owner. We also send notices to the address of occurrence. Both parties, either the owner as well as the resident, are considered responsible parties. So we do send to both. So whether one or both receive notices, they have been legally served at that point. So we do hold the owner of the property ultimately responsible for the care of their land.
Okay, thank you. And then on page 15, under legal interests, it says quit claim deed. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I just heard a different term than that, so okay. On 16, 1B1, I'm looking at A4, and if it's not state code that this has to be published in the newspaper, I would ask that we take that portion out, because readership of newspapers is very low. That's expensive and pretty antiquated. So unless we have to have it there per state law, I would suggest it come out.
We don't have it. We put it there as an option, strictly under the Utah Rules of Civil Procedure. It is not something that we have used, but we have it there as an option for that rare case that we may need it, as same as we do as filing or publishing public notices. But we can remove it if necessary.
I just think it's an antiquated way to operate and not very useful, and I think it eventually will be taken away from the legislature. They will do away with it eventually.
Council member.
We have Rob Wall that'd like to jump in here.
Go ahead.
I think it's probably the same comment that Joel's making. In terms of the technology world we live in, it is antiquated, but it does facilitate us being able to pursue the remedies under the ordinance, not based on notice provisions in Title 10, but in litigation that may follow to force property owners to comply with the law under the rules of civil procedure. So it is helpful in our enforcement actions.
Okay, thank you. And then on B, service by regular mail in the manner described above. Why not just certified mail?
The cost itself with certified mailings, when we mail over 3,000 mailings a year, as well as the manpower that it takes to actually do the certified mailings. I did a study on this about 2 years ago, and that equated to over $20,000 between manpower and actual monies to do these mailings. Right now, we're utilizing about $2,100 in office supply budgets to conduct mailings the way we currently do it.
Okay, well, $18,000 is a lot. We don't have any problem with people saying that they aren't getting them.
We do, but
So how do we handle that?
by state code, once we have mailed it, 3 days later it is considered served. We do work with the people and the citizens that, that indicate that they did not receive it. We work with them on extensions as well as the default fines and those types of things once they do come forward and they bring their property into compliance.
Okay. And just an FYI, I already talked to Brock and gave him a heads up that I was going to ask questions. So whenever you bring policies before us, please remember that I'm not looking at this as it's you. I'm looking at this policy that could be in effect for a year, 10 years, 20 years. And I feel it's my responsibility to make sure that it doesn't matter who's in the position, that the policy still works. So on 16(1)(c)(4), when it says the code enforcement supervisor or any designated enforcement official is authorized to arrest without a warrant? That makes me nervous.
Issuing a citation is also considered a legal
An arrest?
Yes.
Okay.
That is also considered a legal arrest. You don't have to physically take somebody into custody to effect an arrest.
That one time I got a ticket, that I was arrested? Huh, all righty. Well, that officer didn't tell me that.
While she's looking that up, Rob Wallace got another comment.
I did. That is a very good question, and I don't think a lot of residents realize that. The reason you didn't know is that you're a law-abiding citizen and you never had to have it explained to you.
Well, I did get a ticket once.
I wasn't going to elaborate too much.
But I was pretty young, and he was illegally in a private property when he got me, so, Then, when it says 14 days, and it says it several places in here, is that state code or is that our own code? Because if it's not state code, I don't think it's enough time. Because if I have to pay something in 14 days or 20 days, and I only get paid monthly, that's a huge burden. And I don't want I want compliance with our code, don't get me wrong, but I also want the human part there. So I need to know that when it says, and it says it in several locations.
I believe the 14 days, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the 14 days you're referring to is the compliance date. We give 14 days to come into compliance with the code, request an extension, or you can request a hearing.
To correct it, yeah. But if what I have to correct, and the part I was reading, all I could think of is, well, what if my house caught on fire, and so part of it is damaged to a point that we can't live in it, but the fire department hasn't finished their investigation, and then my insurance company, they'll want to come and investigate. And 14 days, that's not a lot of time for all of that to occur. And then if I get penalties on top of that, and if I have to have it torn down, and my insurance company says no, that's going to be a big expense. There are some times that this could be a huge expense, and I might not have that in my checking account.
It's all about communication. All they need to do is pick up the phone and call us, and we will work with them on an extension to whatever point is necessary to get what they need done. If their insurance company is saying we need 6 months, we can work with the building department and work with that number. If someone calls, and we get this quite frequently, they contact us within that 2 weeks and say, hey, I've ordered a city dumpster, it'll be here on this date, we can extend their violation or their compliance date until that city dumpster is delivered, and that's not an issue. It's just a matter of contacting us and making that arrangement.
And I get that, Brock, and I appreciate that you're willing to work with people, but what about in 7 years when you're not in that position and this person took over?
Councilmember.
And they have a grudge, and this is in our law, that worries me.
Councilmember, in that scenario that you created, there's more than one way to abate a property, and so in the scenario you painted, the property would not be in possession or control of the individual at that time. So we wouldn't go cite that individual. You wouldn't have authority to cite that individual for violation because they don't have the authority, the ability to go on the property, especially if we still have it, if the fire department still has it, and we're doing an investigatory on that property to see what caused the fire. They're not even going to be permitted to enter that property. So you wouldn't have grounds to cite them, start tolling their clock, telling them they have to go on and clean up when we're the reason that they are not allowed to go on and clean up. That would never hold up. We could not make that argument. So in that scenario, you could not do it. What we would do is you would abate that in that scenario just by fencing the property off and making sure that children didn't have access to the burnout building, something like that. And that would be considered abatement. So this isn't just a standard that Brock has and then when he leaves it will change. There's legal holdings and legal rationales as to when they're responsible for the property, when they have access to the property, when they can physically go on and clean the property. All that comes into the factor in it as to what type of citation they're getting, what's expected as far as abatement is concerned, and what would be considered an abatement.
But you can see my concern, right? Because if it's, well, we would never do that, well, maybe today we wouldn't.
Well, it's not that Brock wouldn't do that. It's he
it
wouldn't
makes
have
me
he
nervous.
wouldn't have the authority to do that under the code.
Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to 16(2)D. And there are a few places in here that it says this, and it makes me nervous with the new form of government that we're going to on A. 2D, where am I at? My notes make so much sense when I'm at home, and then I get up here and they don't make quite as much sense. 2D5, okay. 2D5A. There are several places in this where it says the chief executive officer is authorized to develop policies and procedures. And my concern with this verbiage is that in a very short period of time, our CEO shouldn't be the one developing policies. That should be the legislative group. And so maybe instead of policies, we could say rules and procedures. But everywhere in this where it says policies, I feel that's the legislative branch of our government's role. And when we're changing form of government, it's something I'd like to have this code looked at. And I know the purpose of changing what we're looking at, we're not really changing much in here other than adding the judge. But we're changing form of government, so I think we need to look at this.
Okay, I want to make sure we're talking about the same. We're looking at 16-2D-5, paragraph A, is that correct?
Correct.
And defining the chief executive, we tried to leave that chief executive officer definition the way it is because of the change that's coming next year. But the issue is whether or not the chief executive can assist in the assessment of the penalty amount and for administrative citations. So the policy remains in your lap, but the actual setting of the fine amount falls to that executive function.
That isn't what that says. It says they're authorized to develop policies and procedures.
For the assessment of the civil penalties, whether it's a lawsuit or are we going to be filing claims, seeking other remedies through that penalty procedure.
Okay. I just have seen things occur in my community where verbiage like that will make me nervous, because depending on who's sitting in this seat, they may take it one way or another, and that makes me nervous. And then on 16.2E3B, I'm wondering, does it have to be done by mail? Could I not call up and say, hey, and it be recorded? Why mail? Is that another legal thing? The request for hearing shall be made in writing and filed with the administrative law judge and the city's director of community preservation.
Yeah, the reason for that to be in writing is to generate the record, so we can put it in a folder, so if it gets appealed to a higher court, then we have the official, it's just documentation.
But we can't document it when they call in and say, just because we're open like 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 or whatever.
Yeah,
and a lot of people happen to work those same hours.
I can tell you from doing this for years that if someone called in and we generate the record and say this person called in and this is what they asked for, and then we put that in the folder, and that cuts against them later on, they'd say, I didn't call in. I didn't generate that record. You guys typed that up and stuck that in there. So we want them to generate the record so we can later on use it and say, is this not what you sent us? And that way there's no dispute as to who generated that record.
Okay. And then on C, just below there, it says, as soon as practical after receiving the written notice of the request for hearing, the administrative law judge shall serve the notice. I really think that if we're going to give citizens timelines on everything, we should give ourselves timelines too. I'd like to see a timeline in there, not just, yeah, when they can. I think that's an awful lot of latitude to give to someone when we're expecting, I feel, a lot out of the citizens.
Councilmember, what section was that one again?
That one was 16-2E-3C.
Thank you, Councilmember.
16-2E6. And then this one, I just wondered if we want it to stay with the CEO or if we want it to also come to the legislative branch. The administrative law judge is subject to disqualification for bias, prejudice, interest, or any other reason for which a judge may be disqualified in a court of law. The chief executive officer is authorized to promulgate, consistent with this title, rules and procedures for disqualification and replacement. Do we want something like with the consent of the council or something maybe in there?
We have another comment from our city attorney.
All right, council member, you explain that a little more. Are you asking about what the appeal process should be or the behavior of the ALJ?
I'm saying that the mayor, in this case, probably, would have a lot of authority right there with this judge. And I think that maybe it should also have some legislative say in there.
Sure. I guess if you as a council want to lay out guidelines, you certainly can. I would not recommend that the decision as to whether or not those are followed be left to you, because you're the legislative body and that ought to be something you decide up front if you want input, and then leave the actual execution of that to the mayor or the city manager. And that certainly could be done. The language already says it has to be consistent with this chapter, or this title, so if you want to put something in there to give some general parameters of what those circumstances might be, you can certainly do that as a council.
This one, I wondered what this looks like. 16-2E-11B. After the administrative law judge issues an administrative code enforcement order, the administrative law judge shall monitor the violations and determine compliance. Is that, are they really going to just look at reports from code enforcement? Because I don't see this administrative law judge going out and saying, nope, car's still parked there. So I just wondered what that looks like.
Maybe the city manager or Mr. Hudson would like to comment. My suspicion is that you're correct. It would be just like a justice court judge or a district court judge. They monitor the decisions they make, but it's up to one of the parties involved to bring to their attention any problems. That's typically the way it happens.
So the ALJ would more than likely issue a written opinion as to compliance terms and how soon and what that compliance looks like. If the compliance is not met, it would be the responsibility of the city to establish by a preponderance of evidence by way of an affidavit, photographs. Somebody within Brock's department would have to prepare what's called an order to show cause with a supporting affidavit or evidence to support that order to show cause. Then go back before the ALJ alleging the violation. The individual whose property or violation would be in question would have an opportunity to defend that allegation as well. So it's a due process that requires both sides to, one, prove, the city to prove their case once again of the new violation, and allows the property owner to defend. Generally, on an order to show cause, a judge, you must find that it's intentional, that it's the fact that somebody doesn't have the resources to perhaps paint a fence does not put them automatically in violation. You have to show an intent to be able to fix something, and then at the same time, a decision not to. When it's that kind of defiance, then the ALJ can take further action. But if someone walks in and says, I know the fence was supposed to be repainted 3 weeks ago, but I haven't been paid, I'm not working right now, those are circumstances that would usually take place at the level of the Brock's department, working with them to identify, okay, if that's the case, we'll hold on to this for how long? We won't submit the OSC.
Thank you. 16-3A-6B.
Councilmember,
As soon as practical to determine whether, again,
what number are you looking at, Councilmember?
16-3A-6B. Upon receipt of request for inspection, the code enforcement supervisor or his designee shall re-inspect the property as soon as practical to determine whether the violation listed. I think parameters should be in these. If I had a violation and I did it and you were going to come back, I'd kind of want to know that you're going to be back there within X amount of days, not just when you can.
I do have set days or standards that I do require my guys to go out and do these re-inspections. Unfortunately, there are times that sometimes that can't be met due to call volume or workload. So I would hate to put it in a legislative ordinance that has to be due to to running into issues with due process.
Okay, but here's the issue I have with that. That's fine, except then on the flip side, then we expect the citizens to have a timeline, but we don't. So it just doesn't seem just to me. We have to make a timeline if they have to make a timeline. Why not? I get it, but
I have a response to that may or may not be what you want to do. Whenever there's a provision in here where, for example, the reinspection as soon as practicable, if Mr. Hudson's officers don't respond, whatever amount of time goes between the time that the resident contacts for reinspection and they get out on the reinspection, that period can't count against them for not complying. It tolls the compliance deadline. So in reality, if they don't respond quickly, that's an advantage to the citizen because it gives them more time. If these guys can't go out. Now the alternative is, if you want to impose a deadline, you can do that, but understand that if we do that, then that now is going to create a personnel staffing issue from him if it turns out that the timeline that's imposed by ordinance is so short that they can't meet that deadline and also respond to other issues they're dealing with in their work. So that's something you want to consider if you want to start imposing deadlines where there's discretion. Understand that discretion actually works toward the resident if these guys don't respond quickly.
guess it depends on the resident, because I wouldn't like it if they didn't come and re-inspect for me in what I felt was a prompt amount of time.
Yeah.
So I'm just bringing these issues up because they're things I saw when I read. Yeah. And I understand that a lot of this has to do with legal, and since how we have 3 legal, I'm a little outnumbered. But that keeps us safe, and that's good. 16(3)(b)(2). A. It's that 14 days again that I really need to know if that's state law or if that's just our code. If a responsible person fails to bring a violation into compliance within 14 calendar days of service of the notice of violation, civil penalties shall be owed to the city. If it's state, then we have to. But if it's us, then I'd like to see it be 30-something, because some people don't get paid every couple of weeks. They
That's
get paid
our
once
code.
a month.
That's just
It's
our code.
ours.
Other cities are 10 days. We went with 14 because we felt 10 was too short.
And I feel 14 is too short. I just feel like some people only get paid once a month. If you only get paid once a month,
All this
you
tells them they have 14 days to either correct, call for an extension, or
yes,
something.
and
It has
depending
nothing to
on
do
who
with
answers the
monetary.
phone, they may or may not get that extension. And it's in code. So if that stays in code, I will have to vote no, because I think it needs to be a longer amount of time.
Council member, obviously, this code is proposal, and like you said a minute ago, this is policy, and you respect it. And when you question it, it's not questioning us, you're questioning the policy, and we understand that. When we bring this forward, you guys set the policy, and we understand that this is just a proposal, and we want it to match whatever you guys want it to be. It takes your name, you're the council, it goes out to the city as something you pass. So we want to make it work for the city and what we need it to do, but at the same time, we want it to be a reflection of what you guys are doing. On the 14 calendar days, if you wanted to increase that, you could. There's nothing wrong with increasing that. Like Brock was saying, some choose 10, some choose 14. If we wanted to make that 30, that number's 30. I do want to just state though, if someone calls and requests an extension, that extension is always given as a matter of right at the request of anyone who calls. It's not arbitrary. Whoever answers the phone isn't deciding based off tone and tenor of the person who's asking if they're going to grant that or not. By right, everyone gets that extension that first time, and we follow the same process when they call on the second time. We try and follow the exact same process for every single person who calls to avoid that equal protection issue that can arise if you start treating people differently. So I just wanted to state on the record that we do give people that extension by right by asking when they call.
Is that written down somewhere?
It's not written down, well, that's just a standard business practice that is admissible in court. It's how you do things, and you show that time and time again, every person who's called in has been given that extension, and you can show that by going through the record and showing that everyone, when they called, that we logged, that they were given the extension, and you can just show that time and time again that that's the standard business practice for how we're doing it, and that's the procedure. You can't write down every single step of every single thing we do. That would be crazy. So, but
Yes,
we do try and create a record nonetheless when we do that.
Where we do have things written down, I have to feel good about it.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm saying. If you guys in your motion tonight, in 16.2E3C, as soon as practicable, if you want to say that the judge needs to give them notice within 30 days, give a final hard deadline, you can do that. In 16.3A6B, if you want to say that we need to give them a hard time, that we need to respond, and there's no time now, you said, I think 7 or 14 days would be totally reasonable to go out and re-inspect the property, something like that. And then, like I said here, if you wanted to extend 14 to 30, however you guys want the policy to be, so long as it's lawful, it's a reflection of you to the community. So obviously we don't have an issue with those. If you want to change those, we're glad to. We're happy to give you the reason and the logic as to why we've done it the way we've done it up to this point, but that's why we bring it to you for a final approval.
If I could just share the rationale behind 10 versus 14 days or 21 or 30, the experience of utilization of this enforcement action in Summit County was generally brought on by citizens who were unhappy about their neighbors not taking care of something. As a result, the neighbor would contact code enforcement. Code enforcement would go out and say, you need to address this issue. If you put off that time frame, you're addressing it from the standpoint that the citizens who are complaining about and wanting action, their complaints are put on hold. The longer you push it out, as you can imagine, because there's not an ALJ that generally won't grant that initial request for an extension. Because you've heard, Brock, we're not about making money, it's about compliance. We're looking to improve the quality of the neighborhoods, change that enforcement action from a forced resolution to something that they agree they will do. The longer you push it off, the longer you'll say to your neighbors, it's not something that's important to resolve quickly.
And then the backside to that coin is we start getting calls from the complainants saying, you guys aren't doing anything. I called 30 days ago and filed this complaint. No one's cleaned up my neighbor's yard. There's still trash and debris everywhere. You need to realize that if it's a 14-day notice and they call and we give them an extension, it's now a 30-day notice. They most likely have a payday cycle in there. If we extend that to a 30-day notice, we're still going to give them as a matter of right that first extension. So if someone calls and complains on June 25th, they have till July 25th, and we give them an extension because that's how the policy is, that's how the practice is. Now we're into August 25th. That's 2 full months of summer. The complainants and the citizens who live around there are going to be upset at that point and saying, you've gave them the whole summer, they've done nothing. That's going to be their perception of what we're doing. So there's a balancing act of which citizen we're trying to keep happy, and on the other side, the due process rights that we're trying to protect of the one we're trying to get to comply.
Yes, and then you might, just hypothetical, tell me that, well, we can't do anything else. There's a lien on the property. If they ever try to move, then they're going to have to correct it. That might be something we do too, Joel.
Usually when we get to lien, we've abated the property and its actual cost that the city has. So one example we had, not to give names, but we had one recently where the individual had a tire pile on their property that was causing quite a bit of problems with their neighbors in the surrounding. We could not get that individual to clean up a mountain of tires, and we had to go in and physically remove all those tires and clean that area up and abate what was happening. We did lien that property, but there was an actual hard physical cost to the city at that point.
I might have called code enforcement on a time or two. So I get that side of it. But in this seat, I have to look at everyone. From my side, I'd like you to just go out, Brock, tomorrow, and I can give you about 15 addresses and make them comply by Saturday. That'd be great. But that's not my role here. In 16.3C1, it says, where does it say that? If additional abatements are necessary within 2 years, treble costs may be assessed against the responsible person for the actual abatement.
So it's funny.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's funny that that one's the next one because the example I just used was the tires. And within 2 years, we were back out there cleaning up another mountain of tires. And so that is, that is where that came from. Yeah, I just wanted to give understanding as to.
It just seems like a lot. And if I thought these policies all worked really well, maybe it would be different, but I guess I'm jaded. Have you ever seen a high desert terrain? I have. The neighbors love it. 16.4D2, and I discussed this with Brock, and he felt it was, so we're good. It was, if 50,000 was enough, I was thinking of a cat lady's home. Is 50,000 in that fund really going to be enough? But he feels like it's sufficient for now, so that's good. And 16.4D3. Oh, it's the accounting. The finance department shall establish accounting procedures to ensure proper account identification, credit, and collections. I just want to make sure that accounting has these checks and balances going on so that we know that when that money is in that account, is it really going where it should? I need an assurance that those checks and balances have really been set up.
I can address that. Actually, for this program, all the revenue and expenditures are recorded in separate line items in the budget. And so, to that point, these budgets would go through the same channel as the rest of the budget and for adoption or amendment. So, we're keeping track of code enforcement revenue and the abatement expenditures, and also newly for this administrative law judge expenditures. They're separate line items in the budget.
Thank you.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate Councilmember Whitelock going through these with us. This is a new thing. This is a change, what I think is for the better of the city. And we change things regularly. And so I'm actually in support of this as it's written. There's probably some things that we could tweak a little bit, but I'd like to see this in action. I see this as an improvement over our previous process, or the process we're trying to change. And I see this as more resident-friendly, customer-friendly. The fees are lower. Compliance time is extended. We have an impartial administrative law judge instead of going to court. I think there's a lot of positives in this, and so I'm in support of this as it's currently written, and we can adjust it as we see it in action. So thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a couple of questions and suggestions based on some of what Councilmember Whitelock brought up. First question, though, is how often are we doing this? How often is a complaint brought to the administrative law process now? How often do we anticipate? I don't even know how to quite phrase that. How often do we anticipate this section of code being used? Does it happen every day? Does it happen weekly? How often are hearings?
Currently, without an administrative law judge, we don't know, we don't have this process in place. So this is something new. We are planning on holding hearings regularly to be able to bring this due process to the citizens. And it's kind of going to be a beta test to see how well it goes.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. That's a good answer. That's kind of what I was aiming towards. Another question is, would it be possible to report progress if a hearing is being requested, somebody's given an extension, yada, yada, yada? Is it possible to report that progress to the complainant who submitted the complaint, so you don't have the guy calling back after 30 days or after 3 weeks or after 2 months or 6 years or whatever it is, saying, hey, the pile of tires is still in the backyard, front yard?
We can try to do that. The majority of our complaints are anonymous.
Okay.
So we can try with some of that.
Okay, so we'd have to have obviously contact information. Might be a
Yes,
good customer service policy or something to say, I can call you back if you let me know who you are. If it's anonymous, I can't call you back. So if you still see it and I didn't call you, that's your fault. So just a thought. The one thing, well, there's a couple of things that Councilmember Whitelock brought up that I have some suggestions on how to change them for the better. Let's start with 16-2E-6. 16-2E-6. I had it right. 87. This is where the administrative law judge is subject to disqualification based on rules and procedures for disqualification that the chief executive officer comes up with. I would just like to see added to that last sentence that are ratified by the city council. I would like to see whatever, and I think the mayor should be able to, mayor/city manager, should be able to come up with whatever rules that are consistent with the chapter that he sees fit. I just think the council should be able to say, yeah, those rules are good. On that section, when you're disqualifying a judge, I think you gotta have a high standard. And so adding one layer of council oversight, or just another layer of a step that you have to go through, so you don't get a mayor who just happens to not like somebody who says, you violated this rule, you're gone. And we never saw the rule. You know, he could have made up a rule saying you have to wear a purple robe. Oh, you wore a black robe, you're out of here. You know, if he just doesn't like somebody. I just like to have those rules, not every case. I don't want every case brought to the council saying, oh, we disqualified him, but just the rules, the procedures, whatever. When the mayor or the chief executive comes out with those rules, just bring them to the council for a ratification. So that's the language I would add to 16-2E-6. Under the same kind of a check on the chief executive, 16-2D-5 was the first one you brought up, where it says the chief executive officer, this is paragraph A, is authorized to develop policies and procedures. I agree, policies are legislation. They're not executive orders, they're not policies. They're ways to carry out policies. So in this case, I would like to see that policies changed to rules as well, that Councilmember Whitelock brought up. So just change that word, policies, to rules in 16-2D-5, paragraph A. So that's one more. And then the last one is, I think, the big one. In 16-3B, Bravo, section 2, paragraph A, 16-3B-2A. Where it talks about that 14 days, if being brought into compliance within 14 days is not done, then we can start assessing penalties. It doesn't reference the appeal process here. If it referenced the appeal process, it said, unless an appeal has been filed under 16-2E-3, could be just added to this section. Then we know that this isn't automatically going to kick in under this section. If an appeal has been filed under 16-2E-3, you know, that's just how I would phrase that.
Please reference the
16.2E3?
Not the, where the appeal can be found, but the section you're actually changing.
Oh, 3B, 16.3B2 dash A.
Thank you.
That would be, so it currently reads, if a responsible person fails, can we debate what a responsible, never mind. If a responsible person fails to bring a violation into compliance within 14 calendar days of the service of the notice of violation, civil penalties shall be owed to the city for each and every subsequent day of violation. It doesn't mention the appeal process at all. So if we can say, unless the appeal process under, I think it's 16.2E3, it may have some other sections that it applies to. That's just the one I wrote down. Unless an appeal has been filed or a request for hearing, however you guys think is the best way to say that. Those are the three changes that I would like to see made. Otherwise, I think we're looking really good. And I can incorporate those into a motion after everybody else has spoken, if we'd like to.
Councilmember Burton.
Well, I was actually going to make a motion, so let's see how it does. With a couple of changes in there. So I move to approve ordinance 18-31 with the following changes. 16-2E-3C, E as in elephant, C as in Charlie. Remove as soon as practical and place 14 days. This is the one where we get back to them after they have, to show that they have filed with us. I don't want to change the one on the reinspection because I think there's some, I think flexibility in that is appropriate. And the other change I want to make is on 16-2E6. Let me know if I got that right, Councilman Jacob. And just add ratified by city, as ratified by city council, or and ratified by city council. To be ratified by city council. Approved to be acceptable as well. If you think that's worded better, I would be with that. Okay, approved.
Where is that again, council member?
16.
2E, thank you.
Yeah, 2E as an elephant. Yeah, I wrote ratified and I crossed out and I put it back on there. So approved is acceptable. And then I want to go with 16-3B as in boy, 2A as in apple, and add unless an appeal has been filed.
Is that the end of your motion?
That's the end of my motion.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Councilmember Burton, a second by Councilmember Jacob. Discussion to the motion. Councilmember Jacob.
One more question. When we're changing city ordinances, don't we usually have public hearings?
No, there's certain types of ordinances that you do have to have a public hearing for, others you do not.
Okay.
So land use always have to have a public hearing. Budget always have to have a public hearing. In this scenario, you do not.
Okay, just wanted to double check, thanks.
Seeing no more discussion, let's vote.
Everyone's clear on the codes that we're talking about, correct?
Why don't you read it?
So that we all make sure, okay. Councilmember Burton moved to approve ordinance 18-31 with the following changes. Code 16-2E like echo, 3C like Charlie, remove as soon as practical, and replace that with 14 days. Regarding code 16-2E like echo 6A, or maybe that's the A of add the phrase as approved by city council. Code 16-3 like Bravo -2 like Alpha, add the phrase unless an appeal has been filed, seconded by Councilmember Jacob.
Mayor, may I ask a clarifying question of the motioner?
Please do.
14 days, are we choosing 14 calendar days, or are we choosing 14 business days?
Please clarify that on your motion.
Because it doesn't specify calendar days or business days, it would be calendar days.
Okay, we have a comment by our city attorney.
By an operation of law, if it doesn't say business days, it is calendar days. That's just the legal standard, so it will be calendar days.
Councilmember Anderson?
But the citizens aren't lawyers, and they probably wouldn't know that. So can we
We
put
could
it?
make that clear.
Okay, thank you.
Joel,
If the motioner is
thank
okay
you.
with that.
Included in the motion.
That would be acceptable. I would be willing to make that amendment.
Amendment to say calendar, put the word calendar in there.
Still seconded.
Okay, let's vote.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb,
Yes.
Mayor Writing,
Yes.
Councilmember Burton.
Aye.
Vote passes 6-0.
Item 8B, discussion and possible action regarding Resolution 18-151, addressing service and funding for the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund. Justin Stoker.
Greetings, Mayor and Council. So this is the third time that we've been back to talk about the Solid Waste Fund. Just a quick recap of some of the things that we've done. Back on June 27th, we presented the issue to the City Council regarding the trend of our Solid Waste Enterprise account. During that meeting, the City Council directed us to go back and do a survey to gauge the temperament of the residents. The survey was completed with over 1,000 residents that responded to that survey, with generally roughly 85% of the residents believing that recycling was important to the future of West Jordan, and most of the residents supporting a rate increase rather than reducing services. On August 22nd, we returned to City Council. The results of that meeting, the staff was directed to go back and to obtain better numbers with regards to an opt-in or opt-out program for recycling, providing recycling collection every other week, eliminating the recycling program entirely, and reducing the Christmas tree pickup to eliminate curbside pickup and leave the central drop-off locations, and the potential of reducing neighborhood dumpster bins from 32 to 16. I've responded to most of these in the staff report, as well as a memo that you have been provided just recently. We've continued to work on this in great earnest to get you as much information as we possibly can. Ultimately, we wish to relay the seriousness of this issue and the urgency. The cash balance that we had in the Solid Waste Fund as of June 30th, 2018, was about $129,000. Our expenses exceed our revenue by about $63,000 monthly. Our fund balance, our cash fund balance, we believe went negative this past week, and is trending negative at $63,000 a month. We've provided information regarding ways that we can cut back on services, the value of those different services, and wish to gain direction from the City Council on which way to proceed. Just as a little bit of additional information, if services are reduced, that would necessitate us going back and formally opening up the contract and performing contract negotiations with our contracted hauler. That's not something that is guaranteed and is likely to take some time to accomplish. If the rate is changed, the item will also have to come back to you as a public hearing for change to our consolidated fee schedule. So regardless, this is not the final step that you would see. You would either see a consolidated fee schedule and or a renegotiated contract. We determined that the soonest that we possibly can change the rates at this point is November 1st. If we were to change the rates by amount of about approximately 25%, the rates would go from $12.83 to approximately $16 a month. Each month that this issue gets postponed, the need to increase the rates, increases by 3% per month to be able to get our fund back into the positive by the end of the fiscal year. So we are anxious to be able to get some direction from the council on how we can continue to provide services and remain solvent in our solid waste fund. And I'm open to any questions that you may have.
Let me start with the first question, which is on the staff report. On the motion recommended, it says, I move to adopt resolution 18-51, authorizing a blank percent adjusted to solid waste fees with blank changes to service and discuss. So what you just said, it sounds like if you added 25%, it would bring that up to where it's going to stay, or bring our cash back up to where by the end of the fiscal year, or by the end of this calendar year, we'll be flush again, or which is it, I guess?
Yes, Mayor, great question. We've struggled over this, and we've analyzed this pretty seriously over the last several days. The chart that you see in the staff report shows that bar going negative by 3%, but that's if the funds, if a rate change doesn't happen by January 1st, doesn't happen until January 1st. If we figured that if a rate change were to happen by November 1st, then we can head off that fund going negative by the end of the year if a rate increase of 25% happens. And it needs to happen soon so we could make those adjustments to the financial system. We can bring back the consolidated fee schedule for approval, and we can notify residents of the potential change. So as we need, the earnestness or the urgency is to get the fund positive again by the end of the fiscal year.
So if we just raise the rate, we don't have to go back to our carrier and ask for a renegotiation of their contract?
If we only change the rate, we do not have to renegotiate the contract.
Councilmember Burton, question.
Thank you, Mayor. So as I looked over these numbers, they were the monies that we would save by reducing different services. It was actually quite disappointing how much savings we'd have on the reduction of services compared to what we're reducing on services. But I'm wondering, I don't know, did you take into account the additional staff time it would take to monitor some of these reductions, such as the opt-in or opt-out and things like that? Is that included? Or is that an additional cost that we're going to have to pay in addition to the savings we get?
We don't believe that there will be any significant changes to staff time by having an opt-in or opt-out program. It would, I mean, there will be some needs to sign up with finance or to drop it off, but after that's happened, it's something that would just continue to run. It wouldn't be a super extensive impact. There will be some minimal impact to finance, but we felt that it was negligible.
So you don't see that happening multiple times during the year? You're thinking it just happened once and it would stay?
I think once a person opts out, they've opted out for an extended period of time.
Okay. Well, my thoughts are, as I read what the savings would be and how little they would be, I don't think that's going to make a lot of difference on what we have to work with. So I would be in favor of keeping the services as they are, and I think we ought to spend our time discussing if we raise our rates and how much we raise them to, because anything else that we do is going to take additional time, and I don't think the return on that would be advantageous to the city and its citizens. That's my thoughts.
Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with you, Councilmember Burton. I think we're at the point now where we've discussed what can be done and how it can be done, and it seems like everything's leaning towards going with the rates. So my question is just a follow-up, is remind me, the costs went up not because of ACE, because we already signed that contract earlier this year. The cost went up because the cost of the landfill went up, correct?
There are several costs that have gone up. The costs for staff time, for example, have increased for the inflationary costs. Costs of the landfill.
Staff time for West Jordan or staff time for ACE?
For West Jordan. The landfill costs have increased from $14 to $16 a ton per garbage, and from $0 to $6 per ton for green waste. And the recycling costs, which are included in the ACE contract, have gone up and were evident in the bids that we received. To the point that Councilmember Whitelock made at our last meeting back in August, the contracted hauler right now is responsible for disposal of the recycled materials, which right now they're operating at a loss. If we open up the contract negotiations, it opens that door for them to again come back and recoup some of that loss that they're getting right now by disposing of the recycled materials. Just wanted to make sure that information got passed on, which you can see in the staff report where the table is provided for the opt-in, opt-out, where the 100% on there is 335, which is the current number that we have that was approved in the contract. But if you look at 71 to 99% usage in an opt-in or an opt-out, it goes up to 480, which is almost $1.50 more. That's because it includes an adjustment to their cost to dispose of recycling. If we keep it at the 100%, then we're locked into that contracted rate, and ACE continues to eat the cost for disposing of the recycled materials.
But let me interject just a question, a thought right here too. I think if I'm ACE and I'm going to be suffering that loss, what's to stop me from just taking those recycles to the landfill?
Well, the contract requires them to take it to a recycling center. Now, they've gotten creative. They are recycling those or reusing those in creative means right now because there's not a huge market for a lot of the paper products and the plastics. And so they're looking around for other industries that could potentially use the recycle rather than the typical shred facilities. One example they gave us is a concrete processing plant where they would take the paper products, they would burn the paper products to fuel the concrete plants, and then use the ash from the paper to go in as fly ash for the concrete. And so they're getting creative to be able to use some of these recyclable materials. But ultimately, the political environment is until there's recycling, sorting, and processing centers in the United States, it appears that the recycling market is going to be where it's at for an extended period of time.
Sorry, it's still you.
Oh, that's okay. So my last question is, we're going to raise it from $12.83 to $16. If we raise that starting November 1st, how much longer will we have at 16 before we have to raise it again? Right. Have you guys foreseen, is it $16 for the next year only, and it's going to go up again? What are your thoughts there?
So I looked at a 5-year forecast for that. A lot of that 25% increase right now is to get us out of a hole. And so after looking at that 5-year forecast again, if we can get positive with that 25% increase by November 1st, it should begin to build up our fund balance up to 6, 8, 10%, and then we start to level off. If rates don't continue to change, if there's no cost of living adjustment to the sewer rate, we would be fine for several years after we get out of that hole and build up about a 10% reserve. We wouldn't need to raise rates for probably about 10 years.
My hope is, and I'm speaking as a consumer paying $16 a month, is that we'd be able to hold that rate for at least 2 years.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's what we're going to do, because honestly, this is a fee increase, but you could call it a tax increase too, even though it's not a tax per se. And with all the other taxes that have gone up over the past few years, not just in West Jordan, they're going to see this. And bottom line is, I feel that $16 for someone to come to my house and pick up my garbage once, 4 times a month, is pretty low. But we as a council are going to get the complaints saying, oh, hey, you raised taxes again. So that's why we've taken so long to do this, because we want to do it right. But at the same time, I want to make sure if it's at 16, I'm not raising it again next September, another $2.
Yeah, and to your point, Councilmember, great advice there. Our rate, even at $16 per ton, is one of the lowest in the country and in the state. The commercial drop-off rate, and this is because we partially own the Trans-Jordan landfill with 4 other member agencies. The commercial drop-off rate, if we didn't own the Trans-Jordan landfill, if we had to use another landfill, would be about $40 a ton. And so because we partially own that Transjordan, we're getting $16 per ton, which is extremely beneficial to the city and is one of the lowest in the country for an EPA-approved landfill. Once that landfill is full, there'll likely be some increased charges because of transfer stations to move it to another location. But for the meantime, we have an amazing rate for disposal of garbage.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. So I just had a couple questions, Justin, and then I want to talk about the 5-year plan. If we changed recycling, like the only thing I'm interested in changing is possibly an opt-out for recycling and the Christmas tree pickup. Would either of those require us to renegotiate the contract?
So the Christmas tree recycling and an opt-out on recycling, yes, both would require contract renegotiation. It would require the mutual approval of both parties to the contract. There's no option in the contract that allows one party or the other to change the provisions without the agreement of the other party.
But we have a 7-year contract, so for the next 7 years, what we would be saying is we're just going to keep things as it is. We're going to pick up Christmas trees even if nobody uses live Christmas trees.
That's correct.
For 7 years, we wouldn't change it. So we're going to pick up Christmas trees for 7 years, and we have just everybody gets recycling for 7 years.
That's correct. Unless there's an amendment to the contract for any particular provision, whether it's Christmas tree pickup, a change in the recycling program, a change in green waste or anything, or the e-waste shred events, any changes would require opening up the contract and would require mutual approval by both parties.
So that puts us to 2025, if my 7 years from now is calculating correctly.
I'm with you.
Is the Transjordan landfill, its capacity, it's full at between now and 2025?
I don't have a great number when the landfill is going to fill up, but we pay the tipping fees at the landfill separate from our hauler's contract. So hypothetically, if the landfill were to fill up next year, our contractor would still haul all the garbage to the landfill, but our fees to the landfill would change as the landfill then has to transfer it to the Bayfield landfill down in Utah County. So our fees at the landfills would increase, but our contractors would not if the landfill were to fill up.
Okay, and if you call, I'm assuming on in my packet it's the item 3 recycling collection on opt-in opt-out program, percentage of usage, a little graph biweekly subscription.
Yes.
Those numbers, were those provided by ACE?
Yes, they were.
And in your conversations with ACE, did they appear to be amenable to be open if we came to them and said weekly recycling, but a resident has the ability to opt out, and we don't want you to pick up Christmas trees anymore, which to me would be almost a no-brainer to not do. Do you think ACE have they indicated anything that they might be open?
That would be speculation on my part. I didn't go into that discussion with negotiation in mind. I was hoping just to get prices from them, which they provided.
If I can interject here, I talked to Justin about this very thing earlier today, and I said, suppose I am the one person in the city who opts out, my bill drops $3.35, but now we're no longer 100%. And so everybody else, their bill's gonna go up to $4.80, while mine goes down $3.35. But because we're no longer 100%, we've had to renegotiate the contract to do this.
Okay, that's a good.
Everybody else's goes up, but me, I go down. So that's the other thing we need to think about.
Okay, that's a very good point. So we have a 7-year contract. It would seem to me that we should have a 7-year plan of what rate increases would be coming. I'm going to use the word stuck with the contract. And I hope that when we renegotiate the contract the year before, so 2024, so so this is recorded. And we're talking about the RFP, that we're talking about things like Christmas tree pickup, we're talking things about opting out, we're talking about things to make this better, but I don't think we're gonna be at $16 for 7 years. And so I would like to see if we're at $16 for the next 2 years, that puts us now to 2021, what is our rate going to be? And it doesn't have to be, I don't think it needs to be, it could be the rate of inflation, right? So 2021, we project the rates to be 16 something. And 2022, we project it to be 16 something plus something until we get to the end of the contract. But I would really hope, whether I'm on the council at that point or any of us are in 2024, that before the RFP goes out to our solid waste providers, that the council have an opportunity to discuss what ought to be in the contract based on resident wishes, because it's frustrating that we have a 7-year contract on things that I don't know that we could do better on. So that's,
I agree with you.
But I see your point, Mayor, and I appreciate that, and I thank you, Justin, for all the data.
Thank you.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Justin, when I'm looking in here, I'm not finding dollar amounts for the dumpster. But I see that, that use of them during the winter goes down substantially.
The neighborhood cleanup program?
The dumpsters that they bring to the.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so the contract that we have right now, the contractor bills us $117 per use, which is a drop off. They come back 2 days later, pick it up, take it to the landfill, dispose of it. We pay the tipping fees on a monthly bill that we get from the landfill, and then they take the can to the next resident. So we pay $117 for that drop off, pick up, tip, and then deliver to the next person. And right now, we have about a 6-week waiting period on those 32 dumpsters. The dumpster program typically runs from the first weekend, I think in April, to the first weekend, to the first week in November. And we're almost completely booked out for the year.
Well, what it says, it's available all year round, but it can't be on the streets from November 1st to March 31st. And then it tells me that the use of those during the winter isn't that high.
That's correct.
So is this part of ACE's contract?
It's part of their contract to do that, pick up, tip, and then redeliver, yes.
So
we pay the tipping fees. We pay the cost to dispose of the garbage separate at the landfill. So the landfill sends us a bill monthly on the cost or the weight of all of the garbage.
Right.
We just pay ACE to move the container around.
So if we just didn't offer it during the winter months,
it wouldn't make
change our contract with ACE at all?
No, it really wouldn't. We do have some flexibility over when that's offered, because really they just send us a number every month, and it may be 800, and we pay 800 trips at $117. The winter month usage really isn't there because people don't like to have those dumpsters in their driveways. It takes away their parking space, their ability to use their driveway, etc. So we found that 90% of all the usage is during the summer months when those containers can go on the street.
So even if we only saved a few $100s by not offering it during the winter, wouldn't that be worth it? Is it? I mean, because one of the complaints that I heard from you is that, well, sometimes these dumpsters aren't very full, and we're still paying $117 to have it transported.
Mm-hmm.
But yet it's not being fully utilized, and that would seem to be more likely if it's on a private driveway.
I agree with you. The full utilization, though, is kind of a different problem that we would like to address. One of the things that we have right now is we have several residents that come into our office and will reserve a dumpster every 60 days at the minimum that they can order or reserve a dumpster. And after that first one, they fill up the first one, but the second, the third, the fourth reservation, where that dumpster is just coming every 60 days, tends to get less utilized and is not as full as it should be. And so it becomes less efficient to have a dumpster in the neighborhood when it's there that frequently. And so we can alter that by requiring a fee for them to reserve a dumpster, or require a certain number of residents to sign off on the reservation of a dumpster, or just to say you can only reserve a dumpster once or twice a year. And so it doesn't change too much by limiting the driveway impact. It's more the frequency of their reservations.
So maybe you should bring us back something in that regard.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Maybe you could bring us back a proposal in that regard.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to address that last point, if we do 3,700 trips a year and 90% of them.
Approximately 90% of them.
If we could eliminate 10% of them by not doing it in the wintertime, it would save us $43,290 at $117 a piece. I just had some questions on your projection, your graph with revenues, expenses, and reserve funds. I love these graphs. Thank you for including it. My question is why revenues have decreased. I understand that in 2014 the rate was reduced, but rates continued to decrease in 15 and 16. I was just curious as to why revenues continued to decrease then. And then if we raise these rates, we have a rate of change that seems to level off in 2020, according to your projection. This is on page 3 of your staff report of the PDF. It's your cool Excel graph. Again, love these. So I'm just wondering what these fluctuations are due to. I understand expenses. See, going forward, expenses are projected to be a continuous increase every year, but the rate of revenue collection changes in 2020, but I'm more interested in what happened in 2015 and 2016. I understand 2014 it went down because the rates went down, but why did it continue to go down in 2015 and 2016? We didn't do that in 2015 or 2016. That was renegotiated in 2017.
And to answer your question, Councilmember, in 2014, $4 million was transferred out of the solid waste fund and moved over to storm drain, which is why you see that reduction from about 5 down to 1. That's why you see that huge drop in there.
In the unrestricted cash.
Correct.
Yeah, no, I get that. I'm looking at the blue line, the revenues line, why that went down from 2015 to 2016. And I get from 13 to 14, it dropped because you lowered the rate in 2014. Or maybe that was why I went from 14 to 15. Why did it continue to drop from 2015 to 2016? I mean, we didn't collect less garbage, or did some people not pay their bill, or, I mean, the city was continuing to grow during those years, as I recall. So why the revenues dropped from 2015 to 2016?
I don't have an answer for that. I mean, that just came out of the financial report, out of the CAFR.
Okay.
Those are audited financial numbers. I can't explain why that happened.
Okay, can you talk about the projection then at 2020? Why we increased revenues here. Do you anticipate growth slowing in 2020 or something the lines start to draw closer together on the right end of this graph?
You're looking at the chart?
Yeah, the chart.
So the blue line takes a tick up because of the proposed rate adjustment, but tends to level off in revenues because of those continual inflationary costs that the city sees every single year.
That would affect the expenses, but not the revenues. Inflation doesn't affect the revenues unless we're changing rates.
You're correct. Let me see. So you're looking at revenues?
Revenues, the blue line, just the difference in the rate change between 2018, 2019, 2020, and then it levels off for 21 and 22. Why is that kink right there? We're just going to stop growing. We're just going to say, no more houses. Yeah. That's what
I mean, the formula in here has a 2% growth rate figured into it. I mean, it's hard to, I'd have to go back into the formulas.
The reason I ask, and it doesn't matter a lot what the answer is, the reason I ask is because Councilmember Lamb brought up a great point, which I bring up every time we talk utility rates, and that's the long-term plan. If we stay at $16 a month from 2018, 19 fiscal year right now, going forward, there's, according to this graph, a place where that starts to not be enough. Those lines are getting close together again.
That's correct.
And there's gonna have to be another bump to the blue line. And I just wonder why that is, because, you know, I'm constantly thinking long-term, 5-year, I want a better projection of where we're headed. Instead of just looking at where we are right now. We have an emergency right now, we have, you know, we're always, we only adjust rates when there's an emergency, by the way.
Well, and what we've done is, I mean, we've looked out 5 years, but when we look out beginning at 4 or 5 years, all we are is putting in a placeholder for inflation. There's only so much that we can predict 3, 4, 5 years into the future. Again, we don't know when the landfill is going to ultimately fill up.
Sure.
We don't know ultimately what the cost of inflation is going to be in 2023. And so we've done our best guess to estimate those and put in placeholders. But ultimately, we can only be so confident in a projection that's extrapolated out 5 years or so.
And this graph does assume that we keep a $16 steady rate.
It does.
In perpetuity.
It does include, it's the $16 rate as far as you see the chart, but it also includes a 2% growth rate to account for new residents that would move into the city.
And I would expect that, and that makes sense. All right, I think that's it for me, thanks.
Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to make a motion. I move to adopt resolution number 18-151, authorizing a 25% adjustment to solid waste fees with an addition beginning in the month of November on the utility fee, on the utility.
Councilmember Anderson.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion from Councilmember Lamb, a second by Councilmember Anderson. Discussion to the motion. Councilmember Anderson.
Just on that last comment, I went to a meeting last year with the Transjordan landfill, and I think he said 7 to 10 years is when capacity is going to be. On this graph, we're projecting $16 for the next 7 years, which I don't think is realistic.
Our chart only goes out 5 years.
Let's find that too.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is, you had indicated that this should be sufficient for a couple years. So this is FY19, so I would assume FY19, FY20. So in 2021, sometime later this fiscal year, which would be 2019, that we would start looking at what trends are. We relook at it so that we're not reacting. I really, you know me, the almost 2 years I've been up here, we've got to stop reacting, we've got to start having a plan. I don't know that the 16 through 2022 is realistic, and I'm not suggesting fee increases, but we ought to call the landfill, we ought to talk to ACE. Does the contract with ACE have a increase every year in their charges? Are we taking that into account next year, the following year, so that we have a plan that it's 3% increase next year instead of 25%. It's 3% increase next year, it's 3% the following year, because we have a contract with no numbers. We can call Transjordan landfill and get a pace of where they're at. We're part owners, we should know those things. And then we can project this even better than just assuming $16 through 2022. That's my argument.
And I appreciate that, and I've actually tried to do exactly what you've said. We've looked out that years. The contract allows for a cost of living adjustment to ACE's contract. It always has. And we do include a 2% increase for cost of living, which is the average that we've seen over the years, plus a 2% growth. So that's included in our projections right now for ACE's contract. We do project a 2% growth in revenue based upon population, and then we use a 1.7% the CPI for inflationary values on our other expenses. And beyond knowing the things that we really don't know, like when the landfill is going to fill up, we've done the best that we can to estimate it out to that point. where to when ACE's contract expires in 2025. And we understand that the landfill won't fill up for another 7 to 10 years. So our estimates they are just estimates, but we feel that our numbers are pretty good out about 5 to 7 years.
Okay, and I'm glad you mentioned that because it's, if the landfill fills up in 7 to 10 years, we know that in 2018. And when we do the next contract, we'll know better what we're doing and what we can get rid of.
Well, and ultimately, when the landfill fills up, that won't change the contract with the hauler. That will only change the fees that we have to pay to the landfill.
Right.
And so that just goes into the normal budgeting process.
But doesn't that go out, don't we pay that out of the solid waste fund?
It does, but it doesn't impact the hauler. It's just a normal budgetary item that the city has to budget for. Because we pay those fees for the landfill.
Right.
The hauler doesn't do that. And so if the landfill were to triple their rates tomorrow, it doesn't impact ACE Disposal at all. It impacts only the city to pay those rates.
Okay, thank you.
Did I understand your question right? Did I respond?
Yeah, just a plan.
Okay.
Just a plan. And then with the motioner, November 1st, is that what you said?
With the November.
With the November billing?
Not November.
And does that work?
Well, Bill Piper had.
Yeah, that works well. I was just wanting to clarify the motion, whether it was for billing on or after November 1st. Is that the motion?
Is November 1st too soon?
No.
I was just thinking with the November billing, which usually comes out at the end of November.
Yeah, and, we actually bill districts varying times during the month, but it would start billing on or after November 1st, is my understanding.
Right, so to clarify my motion, I would say starting on or after November 1st.
Yeah, for billing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay, let's vote.
Mayor Riding,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson,
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb,
Yes.
Councilmember Burton,
Yes.
and Councilmember Jacob.
Nah, no.
Vote passes 5-1.
Okay, item 9, remarks. I have 2 items that I wanted to bring up to talk to council members tonight. The first one was a discussion that we had a few months back about having the public hearings be consolidated into one group of public hearings on one council meeting and then action taken on the following council meeting. Concerns came to my were addressed to me, and so I sent an email out on August 31st postponing that decision, and Councilmember Jacob wrote back and said, let's discuss this at the next meeting. And so I wanted to bring this up per Councilmember's suggestion to talk about in this remarks section right now. So Councilmember Jacob, would you like to lead off with that, I guess?
Sure, I like the idea. I don't remember what the concerns were. I remember getting the email, but I don't remember what the concerns were, so maybe bring that up. But conceptually, I like the concept. I'm on. I thought this would pick me up no matter where I was speaking. I'm sorry.
Do you want to go ahead and open them all up? So we can kind of have an open discussion right now, so everybody's got their mics on and open to talk about this. So
The concerns I have is we're delaying the process. If we're making the builder wait another 2 weeks for that specific week when we have that, and then we wait another 2 weeks before we actually make the vote on it, we're slowing down that process. And that's a lot of money sometimes for them to wait a couple of weeks, let alone a month. And I think that would end up being a month in some cases instead of just 2 weeks.
I don't know if you watch some of these contractors, though, they work a year. The developers will work a year, and they take their time to get through to this year, to get it like they want it. They want it, and then it takes 6 to 8 weeks to get through planning commission. So planning commission's not, that quick either. And so I watched this happen in Salt Lake that they just did at the next meeting where they took the action, and I thought it went very smooth.
Well, it's kind of like you go to the
But
grocery
you're right,
store.
what you say is correct.
and
It does
you
delay
spend hours
that
at the grocery
action.
store, then when you get to the checkout line, you look for the shortest line, you wanna get that line and get out of there because you've purchased your stuff, your ice cream's in your cart, and you're ready to go home.
Right.
And that's how the builders are, when they get to our step, we're the step, and they're ready to move on that project, and they've got commitments, they've made some promises, and
they would
they
get used
borrowed the
to-
money, and they're.
And they would
it's
get used to
costing
the
them.
change if we decide to make that change.
I just wanted to ask a question, if I may, Mayor. But I need to get some input from either David or Joel, and since this is Joel's last meeting, maybe I'll pick on Joel, but I know that state legislature set some timelines as far as how long we as a city can, what's the word I want to use, not delay. but-
Scott, you wanna,
What's the time to, well, I want to pick on Joel. Or Scott.
Well, I'll maybe start, and Mr. Linares can continue. It's a 45-day time limit to take action. That's where I'll kick it over to Mr. Linares. Having it first, marching through the process, you're not really delaying it, in my opinion, but that's where the subtle nuances come into play.
It's a matter of a policy question. Cities do it that way, Salt Lake City does it that way, they manage to comply with the state statute requirements. We can do it if you ask us to. It's just a matter of how you want to do it. Councilmember Burton's correct, it will slow it down to a degree, but if it's done within that 45 days, it's done within the legislative requirement, you're within the confines of the law. That's entirely up to you guys. Some cities do them faster, some cities do them slower. So.
And then, thank you, Joel, thank you, Scott. And then, Mayor, does Salt Lake City meet every week, or does Salt Lake City meet twice a month like we do?
I think, didn't you tell me they met weekly?
They do meet weekly, but those public hearings are gonna be set up by a noticing requirement, and I wanna say that, are those 7 days? Or are they 14? So it doesn't matter that they're meeting every day. If you have that first public hearing notice, it's 14 days regardless of when the next meeting is, and then once you have that meeting, you'd be 7 days in Salt Lake or an additional 14 days here, so.
Okay, that's all I had. I'd like to see it work, and, I'm okay doing it.
I would like to see us try it. I think it's got some benefits, and I would like to see us try it if probably most of us are okay with moving ahead with starting that in October. We can put the notice out there through planning that.
So one concern I do want to put out there is, I think we should try it, but one concern I do have is those folks that come in for a public hearing and voice their opinion. So let's say it's a rezone that they're not happy with. You got 10 are against it, 1's for it. Then those 10 say, okay, great, thanks for saying what you said, and then come back in 2 weeks, we'll make a decision next 2 weeks. So I get it, it takes the anger out of it. At the same time, now you're gonna anger some of those people because they're like, I gotta come back. So.
You can watch online.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm just putting that out there. That's one of my concerns is certain citizens are not gonna like having to come to the public hearing one time and then 2 weeks later come back for the final decision. So.
But on the flip side, they might feel that they're being heard more because when we only hear from them, we can't ask them anything. We can't have any dialogue. So we sit here, some of us smile, some of us don't. And, we listen to them and then we vote. And the perspective I've heard from people is, what does it matter if we come and speak? You've already made up your decision because you vote right after we tell you anyway. So I see it both ways. So I'd like to try it because I think it gives them, for me, it would give me time if they bring something up to be able to get answers to it. Whereas with our current process, there's no time for that really.
Yeah.
It's like, so.
We actually can ask them
I
questions.
can see both ways, but.
But it also gives us a little more time to really think through the responses that we
Like I
had.
said.
and hopefully have a little better opportunity to make a decision we've thought very carefully about in that period of time. And so with that, let's move. One more thing. Dirk?
So if we make that change, for example, this public hearing we held today, we wouldn't vote on it until next week, even though there was no one that spoke to it?
That's correct.
So can we just choose those that are more complicated and do it on those instead of doing it on every public hearing?
That could be, we could just put notice and possible action. We could
Yes,
delay
and
the
then we
action.
can make the decision after
If
the public
nobody
hearing.
shows up, if there's no controversy,
Most
if
of the
it's
time,
easy.
we don't have to worry about a delay.
Right.
We wouldn't have it in instance where we.
In a
do
case
more
like
research.
today, it would probably be very easy.
Right.
To just do that.
Yeah, so if it's noticed, it's noticed as, public hearing, discussion, and possible action.
Exactly.
We don't necessarily have to take action, it's possible action, or we can put it off.
We could delay it to the next meeting.
But I worry about consistency.
And what does legal have to say about that?
Well, I was just going to comment what Councilmember Anderson said. You want to be consistent so that public doesn't perceive that you're trying to play games. With some of them, you wait a week or a council meeting, others you don't. It might give a negative impression. So I would encourage you to be consistent for that reason, not for legal reasons.
As for time for researching, I think that's been happening with the planning commission, and those people spoke there, and we can read their comments, and we can go talk to them prior to that comment. And I've done that a few times when there's been real hairy ones.
And so have I, but I've noticed that sometimes the people that have been at planning commission have been different players than have showed up at city council.
That's true.
And that can be just a factor of the one's a Tuesday night, one's a Wednesday night, typically.
So let's say that we're going to do a test of the last quarter, October, November, December, and in December's meeting, we'll make a decision whether we continued or not after that.
I like that.
Scott, can you?
Question
word
for you,
out?
Mayor. I agree with the comments about consistency, it seems like the majority of the conversation and focus has been regarding public hearings for land use decisions. There are other, Dave Naylor and I were talking, there are other public hearings, fee waivers and such. We're all lumping those together, is that correct?
Correct. All public hearings.
Public hearings. And because my department fields a lot of the complaints that came out with the first direction for the September start date, I can confirm that if we may not be able to get rid of all of the concerns from the developers, but if we give them additional notice from here on out, starting in October, those may not completely evaporate, but we hope to address those. So
Encourage them to get their plans in 2 weeks earlier.
there you go.
And please keep us in the loop, Scott, on this. Please keep us in the loop as you get feedback from developers and residents. And that goes for anybody who gets the phone call. Keep us in the loop and let us know, hey, this is causing a lot more problems than you think it's solving. Just let us know so that we can, again, when December rolls around, we can make an educated decision.
But I can tell you the developers do complain about how long it takes already. And if we add this on there, we're gonna get even more complaints. We do, don't we, Scott, get complaints on how long it takes already?
I've never worked at any city where the developers don't complain about the process. So I don't know if that's ever, I don't know if you ever, short of getting rid of the process, I don't know that you'll ever meet that standard.
But the part that bothers me is when they say West Jordan is worse than city XYZ.
I hear that. I work at several cities, and I hear that at every city. I hear you guys are worse than any city I work with, and I also hear nobody else does it this way everywhere I work.
So wouldn't it be nice to make it so if they say that, they have to be speaking?
They're not going to.
Improperly.
Okay. Next item that I wanted to bring up to everybody's attention tonight was.
Mayor,
I'm sorry, go
excuse
ahead.
me, could I suggest something? Currently, the rules that you follow don't address this, and I'm not suggesting we amend the rules, but I would suggest that you approve a motion, just a verbal motion, that you're going to do this for a period of time as a test, and I think that's adequate to at least recognize that you're not trying to supersede or ignore your rules, but you're going to do this, and then later on, if you decide to make it permanent, we can address the rules themselves.
Well, then I will make a motion that we amend the rules temporarily for the last quarter of the year, October, November, and December, to have these public hearings consolidated and then voted on the next, whatever action is taken the following meeting. And then in December, the last meeting in December, we will make the decision whether we continue it or not. So that's my motion.
Second.
We have a second. Any other discussion to that motion?
Well, I'm pleased that we have a motion because I'm going to be speaking against it, and I would be happy to be on the record to be in opposition to this change.
Okay. Any other discussion? Then let's vote on that motion.
Was the second from Councilmember Jacob or Councilmember, okay.
A roll call,
I think we'll do a roll call vote.
Yes, I just wasn't sure who made the second. Okay, Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Councilmember Burton,
No?
Councilmember Anderson,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb,
Yes.
and Mayor Whiting.
Yes.
Vote passes 5-1.
Thank you, Mr. Wall. The other item that I wanted to bring up tonight is I think I sent everybody a copy of this from Dave Newton. His suggestion was that rather than spend the money that has been talked about for a cultural arts building that was in the neighborhood of upwards of 11, maybe even $12 million, that he suggested that we take a look at something like this, that he's gone out and got a little bit of information and some estimates on, but it's a metal building that can be placed over here in the sugar factory area. This particular concept that he did is a 500-seat concept. His budget that he's got here, or his estimate, is $2.4 million. And my guesstimate is this is about half of what would be needed. By the time you add some storage building, which I know they're gonna need, by the time you put the infrastructure in there, the comment too was made that we probably need to bring that road that stops the DA's office on out to 2200 so that there's access from both here and from 2200 to get to this. If everybody is pretty much thinking that this is pretty good and a good idea and a much better idea than what we've had before, that falls within the budget of the money we already have accumulated. So, if I'm not mistaken, we have about 6 or 8, David, can you help me out there? $1 million? If we count the $2 million from the county.
If we have the $2 million from the county, which I anticipate will be back in front of you this next meeting, so the 26th of September, it would be $8.5 million.
Okay, with that, there should be ample money to build this building, and perhaps even a little money could be used for in the park to help some of the situation we have over there. So if everybody's okay, then I would like to direct staff to move ahead. Again, we'll have to go with an architect to get the plans together for this.
Are we sure we need an architect? Or I think those steel building
We
manufacturers.
will have to have an architect. Even if he goes to a building manufacturer and gets his plans.
I think those building manufacturers have architects as part of their.
And they could, but
Or their
there's
package,
also
yeah.
all the site and infrastructure,
That's
everything
correct.
else that has to come together with
Right,
it. So
some site design.
it does take one single architect that puts this together, so, yeah.
Mayor, one other comment to Councilmember Jacobs' question. I dealt with a number of grants that cities receive from the county, and the current draft we're working on, as well as other agreements I've seen, require that the city will submit the plans to the county prior to a certain date. So the city will have to have architectural engineering drawings done just to meet the terms of the interlocal agreement that will give us the funds from the county.
If I can add, Mayor, as a liaison for the Arts Council, we discussed this at our last meeting, and they're very supportive of having, it's not a metal shed, it's a steel structure building, can have a nice exterior structure, insulation. I mean, it's just gonna look like a regular building. It's got more seats than the former 78 South building, the 11.3 million. And we can do it within the existing budget and put it on the sugar factory site.
You know, when he first started talking about metal buildings, I remember this one on 7800 South that was, when they started putting that up, it was just a metal structure. And there was a lot of concern about that building just being a metal building, but by the time they finished all the facade on the outside, it looks really nice.
You talking about the church on 70th?
No, it's
Rent to own.
easy rental
place.
down there, easy furniture.
Because
rental.
the church on 70th and 32 is also that metal.
It's
true,
it's
yeah,
more
that's-
appropriately as a prefab building. It's a prefabricated
I'm just saying, if we
building
want to look at an
that's-
example, I believe that church on 70th and 32 is the same kind of
Another
building.
good example.
But I'm in favor.
So with that, we'll give staff direction to move ahead with an architect.
Can I add one thing with that though, with the architect, can we get kind of an idea of city costs of how much it's gonna be to maintain that as well? We don't need that immediately, but I think we need to start looking at that so that we know a yearly cost to clean, maintain, et cetera.
Understood, ongoing cost annually. The idea I know is, I've heard from all the council members, is not only use of the art community, but if there's someone who has a theater in a neighborhood that wants, or a dance troupe, I think that's what I heard, a dance troupe that would be able to use it, so we'll
Or
come up with those
recital,
calculations.
Or whatever it happens to be.
Yep.
In fact, instead of taking the extra money out of the arts and using it for something else, I'd like to see that money preserved and used for the ongoing costs, so we have a revenue source for that until the building gets building up and getting to generate and reduce how much it costs for the maintenance.
And I want us to sell chairs and stuff so that we can have Midvale on our chair.
Okay, we'd like to now go to item 10, closed session.
Hey, wait,
Who's got?
what if we have remarks?
Oh, anyone else have remarks? My apologies.
Well, one of them I was going to ask was the arts, so thank you, you answered that. But my other one is, where are we in regards to the water rates, the data that was asked for?
Is that for the study, are you asking? Because that probably will be back in front of you for approval for the selection of, we had 4 bids? 3? No, 4, sorry. 4, there was 4. They will be back in front of you with a approval for the study to begin prior to the 26th, or on the 26th. I've even considered trying to get that information to you in a way sooner, so that if there is a clear individual group that should be selected, we can get them selected quicker. I haven't seen the final analysis of the study, so if I get that, I will be sharing it with you sooner than later, but it will be on for the 26th. Again, the anticipation is it would be completed by the end of November so that you can analyze that 1st of December, hopefully make a December decision, implementing that by the 1st of January. There are several factors that need to also be added at that time that have come to light that will also be shared with you relevant to the tanks issue, commodity, all of that will hopefully be getting you as a big package.
Gee, and for December, thanks, David. Then I just, I want to express a little bit of frustration. And I wasn't on the council then, so my vote isn't there. But I wasn't aware the current Public Works building was going to be torn down. And wondered if anyone even put any thought into repurposing that building. What are we doing with that site where the Public Works building is now being raised?
Justin can answer that.
Thanks for the question. It's a very excellent question. We looked into the renovation of that property long ago, 10 years ago, before I was working at Public Works and before I was on the city council. And the concern with the old Public Works facility, there were some electrical and health hazards with the building, in addition to the space. There was black mold in the insulation. There was some electrical wiring problems. It didn't meet fire safety. The roof was disintegrating, was leaking. And so at that time, if I remember correctly, it was going to cost $6 million to renovate it to bring it up to current codes. But it still didn't add very much space to the building. The old facility was approximately 45,000 square feet. And at that time, and again, I wasn't part of that decision, is that for $6 million to renovate the facility, it was more cost efficient to build a new facility. And so in 2009, JRCA, an architecture firm, was hired to do a feasibility study into the new public works facility. That's undergone several iterations, from one building to a number of cluster buildings, where you'd build one building for the water, and then next year you would budget and build another building for the sewer group, and so it's gone through several different cycles and iterations. Approximately 5-6 years ago, the city council, and again, there was some property negotiations going on with 84 Lumber and some other things. The commitment was made to move forward with the new public works facility. They committed to doing it on the same site to save on some land purchasing costs. The city actually received a credit of about $600,000 to remove the old building in construction recycling. And so if you've been out to the site, the demolition contractor is a specialist out there and actually sorts the asphalt in one pile, the concrete in another pile, the metal in another pile, and general waste that can't be used in another pile. And then they go and they recycle the metal, they recycle the masonry, and they reuse all of that, and the city gets a $600,000 credit towards the cost of the project because of the value of the old building. To be able to renovate it, to make it safe, was going to cost way too much money. It outlived its life. The HVAC had died. There was certain things in there that we had just not replaced.
Well, I saw it as an arts building, actually, Justin. I didn't think it as a public works building any longer. I thought, we had a frame, we had a lot, we had parking.
It would have had to have been completely scraped out. It would had to have undergone some hazmat type of situations to clean it and to be able to reconstruct it. And again, the mayor may know better than I was, but I believe the renovation costs in it were about $6 million.
Okay, and so that site will be?
The site is being used for public works. In the location of the old building is going to be the new fueling station, which will serve all of the vehicles in the city, as well as a carport area for the 10-wheelers. So they would have a place to park during snow events. They could have a covered parking, so it gets them ready, easier to deploy during snowstorms.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Okay, any other remarks that somebody would like to include tonight? Then we will move to item 10, closed session with a discussion of the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual, or strategy session to discuss pending or reasonably imminent litigation, or strategy session to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property, including any form of a water right or water shares.
So moved. And dismissed from there. And dismissed from there. Motion by
Councilmember Burton.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Anderson. We need a roll call vote.
Councilmember Burton.
Yes.
Mayor Riding.
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob.
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb.
Yes.
And Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Vote passes 6-0.